Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Oliver Cushing. My guest today is the founder and wealth advisor at Olympus Wealth Strategies, John Sidery. John, thank you for joining us.
Oliver, it's a pleasure being with you and very thankful to be on the podcast and hopefully shed some light to your listeners.
We're happy to have you. So, let's just start off. Tell us a little bit about your background and what sparked your interest in becoming a wealth advisor.
Yeah, honestly, growing up, my grandparents and my parents ran a small P&C insurance business in a small town. I'm from Indiana. And when I was growing up, the town was 5,000 people. So it was just very much everybody knew everybody. And growing up, loved going up to their office. It was walking distance away. It was like 2 blocks away from the house. And so have fond memories of going up there and hanging out with my grandparents and my parents and watching them interact with clients. But ultimately, when I was in high school and ultimately went off to college, I went off to college saying, I'll never get into business. I don't know why that was. I guess I just was adamant to blaze my own trail and just said I would never get into business. Well, anyway, fast forward until the beginning of my junior year of college. I was kind of an undeclared major really at the time. And my grandfather passed away, and the one that ultimately partnered with my dad on the insurance business. And I watched as my mom and my uncle really had to unfold a lot of things from an estate planning perspective that probably could have been done a little bit better. And I watched as my family had to go through that and just to ensure that my grandmother would be taken care of and what the family needs to do to step in to help out and where is everything, and really feeling like there was a big lift and maybe a lack of planning from their end, because we were a family that never talked about money, never talked about finances. And so I think there was just kind of this understanding that somebody's going to have to deal with it when they're gone. And so that really sparked me to get educated in that space. So I changed my major to finance and economics. And ultimately, as soon as I graduated, got into financial planning and financial advisory. And I've been in that field ever since. So for the past 10 years.
Oh, wow. And so you learned a lot over 10 years, I bet. And then you got the background there. And what you said, everyone's got a unique story, but it's not uncommon. Somebody it takes usually a life event for someone to say, hey, I need to start focusing on these things. And I'm similar. My mom's been in the legal field forever. And I said, there's no way I'm going to end up in the legal field. And then junior year of college, lo and behold, I ended up in the legal field. So it's very interesting. And so, you're a wealth advisor at Olympus Wealth Strategies, but you're also a founder of Olympus Wealth Strategies. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. And honestly, as much as maybe I tried to run away from how my family did business, I think it's all circled back and, kind of mirror on the wall, right? And so anyway, I'm a huge believer in family level service. That's what my grandparents and parents had always kind of coined and talked about, was family level service. And I saw it all the time. They had an office phone that back in the home phone era days, it would ring to our house and they would take calls 8 p.m. at night, 10 p.m. at night, didn't matter. Somebody gets in an accident, they call the office line. Mom's taking that call at 10:30 at night and helping them and walking them through. But also from a wealth management field perspective, I think a lot of people, and I can see why there is this belief, I think a lot of people have the belief and feeling that I have to have already a large sum of money to work with most financial advisors. Well, if we look at average America, most people don't have a large sum of money in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. They might accumulate that over time in their 401k or some other stuff we could talk about, but most people don't have that, but most people really need financial planning. And so one of the reasons why I decided to found Olympus Wealth Strategies was to be able to provide family level service and really bespoke financial planning to people of all walks of life, whether you're in your 20s and you just got your first job and you're getting started, or you're in your 70s and you're trying to enjoy your golden years as best as you can. We want to deliver that, but we want to deliver it in, it's such an overused phrase, but a high touch or white glove service. We really want to treat people truly like you would expect your family to treat you.
And that's a good mission that you have there. And we hear that all the time here with estate planning as well. Well, I'm young. I don't even have kids yet. Or, oh, I've got some young children. Maybe I can't afford it. This isn't for me yet. But, like I've heard from so many people, like the earlier you start with financial planning, the earlier you start with estate planning, the better, because, this is an evolving process. You don't just do it once and you're done.
That's right.
This is a continuing relationship over time. And so, we hear that all the time from people. Oh, I didn't think I would need this until something happened. I'm really too young for this. And so we see, our average client is, usually in their 50s or 60s, but we always urge people, I just got married 2 months ago. One of the very first
Congratulations.
things we did, thank you. One of the very first things we did was we got our wills. We got our powers of attorney documents. We got all these things ready because we're going to go on a honeymoon. Something went wrong, God forbid, we need to have these paperwork in line. And so we see that all the time with you, but our average client is somebody who's in their 50s or 60s, and they come in and they've got a house, they've got some kids, maybe they have some grandkids, they got a little nest egg built up, but things happen before that time. And sometimes, as soon as you get married, I think it's a good time to go ahead and get your paperwork in line and start getting your finances in line. But for you, what does your ideal or average client look like that walks in the door to work with you?
That's a good question. I'm going to give you maybe the average because,
Hmm.
ideal, I think that's all in the eye of the beholder. We're blessed for every relationship that we have, but maybe our average client tends to be in their 50s. We have people as young as 23 and as old as in their 80s, going on 90. Actually, no, we've got somebody who just turned 90. So, but average client is probably in their 50s, working professional. Maybe you could argue that might be peak earning years of someone's career. We do work with several business owners locally in town and also some people in their 50s, whether it be, kind of in a management role or whatnot. But I would say from an age wise, we're probably on average in the 50s. But like I said, we range from people in 20s through 90s. So it's a pretty wide gambit there. But like you said, from an estate planning perspective, how that it
Hmm.
evolves, right? The conversations we're having with our 90-year-old is different from our conversations we're having with our 25-year-old client. And I would say one of the biggest blessings that we have is there have been multiple generations of clients. And so,
Hmm.
that's a big blessing to us that, a family would entrust us to want to serve the next generation. So that's how we ended up working with several people in their 20s. But it's exciting to see them, start their career, go their career, and, his mom and dad are maybe starting to slow down in theirs. So it's, that's kind of a longer answer for your question on maybe an ideal or average client, but it's a pretty wide gambit.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect answer, because the average client is going to be who you're mostly seeing. The ideal client is really, like you said, it's in the eye of the beholder. And so the strategies that you can use I mean, you can have two people that are the same age with similar situations, and what you're going to do for them is going to look different depending on their individual circumstances. So it's kind of hard to put it like, oh, if I had to craft the perfect client, what would that look like? Because there really is no mold for this. And I assume nothing you're doing is cookie cutter. You're walking in and you're assessing the situation. How does that look?
Yeah, I mean, it really is starting with kind of reeling it back to family level service, right? And it's really starting with sitting down with people and getting to know them, understand them, what drives them, what's their wants, maybe their fears, why is this important to them, really understanding who they are, what they do, and how they tick. That's probably the first several meetings that we have before we even really dive into proposals or dive into a recommendation. Because, and nothing inherently wrong, but, if all I did, Oliver, was slide a 10, you know, questionnaire across the desk and say, fill this out. And, given your age and how you answer these questions, that's how I'm going to invest you. I guess nothing inherently wrong with that per se, but that's just not how we do business here at Olympus. And it's just very personal. And so, getting to know people, that really helps us understand what drives their desires and maybe back into that from a financial planning perspective, what they need to do to achieve those, and then
Hmm.
ultimately the investments that match that philosophy. And so you're right, everybody is ultimately invested a little bit different. There's no cookie cutter models. Everybody goes into one of three portfolios. It's a very customized process.
That's awesome. And so what makes you unique as a financial advisor? What is Olympus Wealth Strategies? What would y'all be known for?
I would say outside of the service, I'm sure everybody touts, great service. I would also say that we're very used to and implement when appropriate alternative investments or private market strategies. Not everybody, maybe you could say, has access to those or has familiarity with those to be able to invest for clients. And so that's something that we're able to utilize with some providers that we have, ultimately to try to help mitigate some volatility, but at the same time achieve kind of a long-term investment goal.
That's awesome. And so, when it comes to financial planning, I'm sure you see lots of different types of people, lots of different situations, but what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make? And, what are some of the biggest positives that people could do with financial planning? So both sides of the coin there,
Yeah,
mistakes and wins.
Yeah, I would say from a planning perspective, we're very integrated with, great firms like yours, to ensure that, when you talk about financial planning, right, and wealth management, there is asset management and then there is true holistic wealth management. And if you're going to be in the holistic wealth management space, or at least say that you are, you can't just manage assets and then disregard everything else from a financial planning standpoint. And, we do have a lot of tools and resources in-house, but also we partner with great firms like yours to ensure that our clients are well taken care of. And so most of our conversations on the onset are talking about estate planning, talking about taxes, talking about banking, talking about other things. And then we eventually get to investments, whether that's life insurance. And, I guess most recent examples, I'm working with a couple who just turned 40 and they didn't have an estate plan in place. They didn't have really an accountant that they really leaned on. And so that was a lot of work up front that, we're an independent RIA firm. And so the only way we get compensated is through management fees from our clients. There's no commissions, there's no soft dollar arrangements. And so the only way we get compensated is through revenue from management fees. And so a lot of this work that we do is really to try to help mitigate some issues. And so you mentioned kind of the things, pitfalls to avoid and things that are really good. I'd say pitfalls to avoid is to neglect something over time. Like you mentioned, just married and you already took care of your estate plan and powers of attorney. And I would say that a lot of people put a lot of things off, whether that is estate planning or getting life insurance or maybe having a good accounting relationship. But certainly from a financial planning standpoint, thinking, I'll just wait until my 30s. And then your 30s turn into, I'll just wait until my 40s. And the next thing you know, you might look up and you're 50 and you go, oh my God, I've got to save what seems like an insurmountable amount of money every year just to be able to retire. So we can't stress enough the kind of the power of compounding in time, right? The younger you are, time is your friend to achieve your goal, regardless of what the market does. And so I would say maybe a pitfall to avoid is putting stuff off, whether it's in your realm or ours. And then, some great successes is people who are actively engaged. I would say that whether that's in really any field, right? If you're actively
Right.
engaged,
Yeah.
you're intellectually curious about stuff. I think people who are more involved and engaged, I would say tend to maybe have better results because they're constantly wanting to understand the why behind something. And I think when people understand the why behind something, that kind of drives habits and usually leads to better outcomes.
And yeah, that's one of those things that we see. We always urge people to come in when they're early in life. So, because a lot of things we do can be changed over time. You can have a situation right now that looks great. And then, in the future, we can change things to make it work for you. We deal with a lot of people all the time. They do Google searching. They're looking things up. They're watching TikTok. You like it when people ask questions, right? You like it when people come in curious about things because when they don't, you just kind of assume things, it's not always going to be the best outcome. And so we always stress to people, ask us a ton of questions. We love questions because it shows, like you said, a curiosity about what you're doing. You're not just doing it, getting out of the way, although that is some of it right there, right? You just kind of want to get it done. People say, I've got this done. But we love it when people come to us with questions because it shows they're engaged. The people that are engaged and ask these questions, they're going to be the ones who have the most successful plans because they're like, well, what about this? Hey, I've got a question about that. And it might be something that they think is simple, but really, there's nothing simple. I mean, every single question could be is super, super important. And the only bad question is the one you don't ask, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's well said, Oliver. The only bad question is one you don't ask because sometimes that's the one that's most important to you and your family. And we can do as good of a job as we can, whether it's preparing someone's estate plan like yourself or helping someone from an investment management standpoint like we do. But the more information that we're able to get, which is why we really lean on family level service to get to know people as best as we possibly can before we implement anything. It is for that reason, because we try to not leave too many stones unturned, at least the ones that we're actively trying to figure out, to be able to implement the best possible plan for them and ultimately avoid pitfalls, right? Because like you said, it's a question you don't ask. It seems to be always the most important one, which can lead to an outcome that someone doesn't desire.
And you mentioned earlier, I really like how you lean on the family level service and that you've been working with people sometimes for generations. We have a thing here we like to call the lawyer for life relationship plus. Okay. When people come to us, we're dealing with lots of things that extend for their life, but then it extends for after their life, and you're dealing with a lot of that too. And so having that level of a relationship where they can trust you not only with themselves, but then when their family goes, I know where to go. I know those people treated my family well. I can trust them. And that builds over the generational lines, that trust and also that generational planning really helps take it to the next level. When you're able to think not only for my life, but for the next, you really are set up in a good position. Because with us, everything that we're doing, and I'm sure this is the same case with you, they're worried about themselves, of course. They're trying to do this, but ultimately their thinking is a little bit more intergenerational. They're thinking family. They're thinking, I'm not going to be here forever, but while I'm here, I want to be able to have the best time that I can. I want to plan the best I can, but when I'm not here, I want my kids and my family to be well taken care of. And so that's just really, I love that. And I love hearing that from you. So I have another question for you. Do you have an example of a time that you were able to really help a client, go from point A to point B and they just walked out of there thinking, this is awesome. And then the plan worked the way they wanted it to?
Yeah, when we help somebody, and there's a lot of examples there, but I would say maybe the most relevant one would be when we get somebody to work optional lifestyle, we like to call it, and you show up because you want to, not because you have to for the paycheck.
Mhm.
And that's very rewarding. And so maybe from an example standpoint, I work with a family who ultimately is in their late 50s, both husband and wife. They assumed that we just have to work until we're 65. Their kids are grown, they're out of the house, and we just have to work until 65 for health insurance purposes. They enjoy their jobs, but I wouldn't say they were overly thrilled to show up, for the next 7 years to get them to 65. And
Right.
so we did a lot of planning, both from a tax planning perspective and involved their CPA, but also from a, cash flow and financial planning perspective, and took a look at, what they currently have. And, the great outcome was they're now retired and they wanted to step away from work. They wanted to travel. They wanted to build memories. They're taking their kids on trips. They're recently grandparents, are spending a ton of time with their grandkids. And so it's very rewarding, especially when, they share and email me a picture of their family vacation, or, they let me know that they're having just a great time in life. That's so rewarding. And I'm sure like for you too, right? It's the hard work that you put in and then you see the fruits of your labor. And sometimes you don't see the fruits of your labor in a year or 2 years or 5 years. Sometimes it takes 10, right? Or sometimes throughout the course of our whole career. And
Hmm.
it's really rewarding seeing someone live the moment they worked hard for their whole life and they're enjoying it. And I would say that something that we talk about here in the office is, the best investment you can make is memory dividends.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
certainly you want to have a certain amount of money to be able to retire. That's important, to be able to feel financially free and independent. But it's certainly creating those memory dividends with your loved ones, right? That's why we work hard. I would say that's why most professionals show up and work hard every day, is to go out and have the moments where you have the barbecue with your family, or you take the vacation with your kids, or you do the different things because that's what you love doing, is spending time with the people that you love. And so we're big on trying to help people create those memory dividends as best as we can.
That's awesome. And when I was hearing that, I'm thinking they did the work on the front end. You're helping them structure it on the back end, and you just gave them years of their life back. I mean, that's incredible because, I think a lot of people think that they're like, oh my gosh, got to work till 65. Some people think they got to work for longer. Some people don't ever want to stop working. And I'm sure you see that. Some people are like, my plan is I'm going to work until I can't work anymore. And so, we see that all the time. My boss is probably never going to stop working. He could have stopped working probably 10, 15 years ago and been okay. He'll never stop working, but he makes sure to make the time. He's done his plan. He's got, he'll fly off and do something or another. And so we love to see that. But, there's other people they want to be able to stop. They're like, okay, this is my cutoff and I'm done. And so it's
Yeah,
awesome that you're able to
and I would
actually
say,
sit
Albert,
them down.
regardless of if you decide to keep working or you decide
Hmm.
to retire early, this might be another one of those pitfalls to avoid is just retire to something, whether that is
Right.
hanging out with family, whether that is traveling, whether that is getting involved from a philanthropic standpoint, retire to something because I have seen the different ends of retirement, and it seems that those who remain active, if they're able to physically, but certainly mentally, they seem to maybe have more of a fruitful retirement than those that just go from, work, 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 work. They submit their retirement on a Friday. Monday, they don't show up to work and they don't have anything to do. And they just kind of, sit around is a bad phrase, but, they kind of don't know what to do with all that time. And so
Right.
I would say maybe some good advice would be just make sure you retire to something.
Have something to do. I mean, I know it's a big conversation people have. He comes home, he's retired, and it's like he hadn't been there every day for 15, 20 years. It's like, what are you doing over here? You're all on my way. And so finding the hobbies and things to enjoy when the retirement's a huge thing. And so, through the work that you do, what do you hope that your legacy will be? What do you hope that you'll be remembered by through your work?
Yeah, and I would say this, Oliver. I mean, I hope the families that we serve, they see the hard work and hopefully the positive impact that we make. But really, I would say my objective with kind of maybe a higher life purpose is, really to serve from a faith and family standpoint and ultimately serving clients, right? Because they're, from a family standpoint, I work hard for them, and from a client standpoint, they entrust us with an extremely high responsibility, which is helping them financially be secure, be confident, and ultimately have end goals in mind and for us to help them get there. So I would really hope what Olympus and maybe I with Olympus and Remember for is really delivering on our promise of treating everybody like family, regardless of the investment dollar amount, being available for everybody, and really, I guess, for being a broken record, I would like to handle business much like my grandparents and my parents did, which is, not worrying about necessarily the P&L, how that looks every month, not necessarily worrying about, can you only do business from 9 to 5, but it's really just being a helping hand to as many people as possible. And I don't think there's a certain dollar goal that, associated with this. It's more of a Ted Lasso feel good thing, right? We're just trying to make a big positive impact in people's lives, and we're blessed to be able to work with as many families that we do.
John, thank you. This is a wonderful interview.
Oliver, I really appreciate being on, and you guys are a wonderful firm, and it shows why. And I'm very thankful to be on the podcast.
All righty, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Oliver Cushing. My guest today was John Sidery. And to connect with John, you can find him on LinkedIn and at investolympus.com. John, thank you again so much. We'll post the links below in the show notes. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to John.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.